Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, President Rivlin accused of conspiracy to oust Netanyahu as the Central Elections Committee presents the final vote tally. Meanwhile, the United States quietly ups aid to the Palestinian Authority in spite of failures in vetting recipients for links to terrorism. And finally, an ancient mystery possibly solved. See what all the excitement is about at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The Israeli Central Elections Committee presenting the final results of the election Wednesday, a week following Israel's landmark fourth serial vote. But just as we feared and now know for sure, there is no clear winner that can form a coalition. President Rivlin then calling for unusual collaborations to end the deadlock.
החברה הישראלית זקוקה לממשלה שתעביר תקציב המדינה, שתוביל דרך של ריפוי המערכות והאזרחים שנפגעו, ותחלץ את מוסדות המדינה מהקיפאון הפוליטי אליו נקלענו דווקא ברגעים שבהם אזרחי ישראל זקוקים כל כך למוסדות מדינה יותר מכל. כולי תקווה שנבחרי הציבור ישכילו לשמוע את העם בישראל, ישכילו לשמוע את תביעתו לחיבורים לא שגרתיים, לשיתופי פעולה חוצי מגזרים, לעבודה עניינית ומסורה למען אזרחי ישראל.
President Reuven Rivlin making these comments just 4 days before meeting with the elected party representatives, after which he'll give the mandate to whomever he thinks will most likely be able to form a government. But members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party interpreting the vote and Rivlin's comments very differently. Several accusing the president of choosing sides and of working with the opposition to oust Netanyahu. And this as Netanyahu again appeals to right-wing rivals Gideon Sa'ar and Naftali Bennett to join him.
זה לא סוד שהיו בינינו מחלוקות לאורך השנים, אבל ידענו גם להתגבר עליהם ולעבוד יחד לטובת אזרחי ישראל. ואני אומר, בואו נשים את המשקעים האישיים מאחורינו. בואו נקים ממשלת ימין יציבה שתחזיק מעמד לשנים. מדינת ישראל ועתידה הם הדבר החשוב באמת. זה מה שהציבור העצום שתמך בנו בליכוד ובמפלגות הימין מצפה שנעשה. אני קורא לכם, חזרו הביתה למקום הטבעי שלכם, בימין.
Bennett and Sa'ar, on the other hand, so far brushing Netanyahu off, with Sa'ar, for one, rejecting the offer outright on social media, blasting the Likud for its conspiratorial accusations against him and of the president, and promising to fulfill his commitment to the voters in neither supporting nor joining a Netanyahu-led government. Then Bennett, for his part, still playing it close to the vest, leaving out specifics but saying that he'll continue to make every effort to establish a good and stable government that'll pull Israel from the chaos. That said, he's still seemingly ignoring opposition leader Yair Lapid, Benny Gantz, and Gideon Sa'ar's offers to discuss a rotational coalition in which Bennett would reportedly get the first rotation as prime minister. And this, likely as Bennett has vowed already never to sit in a coalition that includes the Islamist Ram party, signing this pledge live on election night. Also, Bennett's leverage to be prime minister without a rotation is growing significantly anyway. A new poll showing that over 62% of anti-Netanyahu voters believe that Bennett would have the best chance to form a stable yet politically diverse coalition. Joining me now for more on the political deadlock, J-Post political correspondent Gil Hoffman. Gil, thanks so much for being with us. Now, let's start with President Rivlin's comments on being open to unusual partnerships. Do you take this as an honest suggestion, or do you believe the Likud in that it's a move somehow against Netanyahu?
The president is the ultimate professional. This is the fifth time he's leading the formation of a new government. Even though his animosity toward Netanyahu is very real, it's gone on not only for decades between him and Netanyahu. His father hated Netanyahu's father. His grandfather hated Netanyahu's grandfather. It goes back to the 1880s in Lithuania. No one can doubt that Netanyahu will be I think that President Rivlin will be the ultimate professional in handling this situation.
See, so now let's talk a little bit about some of the potential coalition groupings, because again, we've seen that Bennett, at least, who is an arguable kingmaker here, is saying that he's not going to sit with anyone who includes the Arab parties. But is that a realistic vow to make, or is any coalition likely going to include a party like Ram?
He made that vow a couple days before the election. I don't recommend listening to any politicians in any country within the last week or two before an election. Since the election, Naftali Bennett has said nothing. He's been climbing Masada and touring with his wife and 4 kids. And we're waiting to hear what he's going to say. There's no doubt that he's going to have to break one promise, if not 3, in order to allow the formation of a government, whether it's led by him or somebody else. No one has a government without Ra'am at this point. And that's why we're looking to hear what the leader of Ra'am, Mansour Abbas, is going to say tonight.
So, I mean, I know you just mentioned that Bennett is playing it pretty close to the vest, as we know, but why do you think he's completely stonewalling the opposition parties, Lapid and Sa'ar and Gantz?
I don't know how much he is. That's what they're claiming. They're saying that they've been trying to set up a meeting with him, and he has not been agreeing. It could very well be that he's stalling time while his former chief of staff is negotiating with Netanyahu, as reported last night on Channel 12, that Bennett would be given 7 reserved slots on the Likud list, a certain portion of the Likud Central Committee, and other benefits and perks toward a merger of the Yamina and Likud parties. And maybe he wants to go to Lapid only when that's ready and then try to get a better deal with him, or maybe he's using Lapid to get a better deal from Netanyahu. Time will tell.
All right, so finally, my least favorite question. Do you think that we're heading back to 5th elections?
No, God forbid, anything but that. I think that the people of Israel would not tolerate that. And I think that the politicians realize that they have to compromise and, as the president said, have unconventional partnerships in order to prevent that from happening.
All right, Gil Hoffman, thank you so much.
Pleasure, Aaron.
In other news, United States President Joe Biden quietly increasing aid to the Palestinian Authority far beyond what was made public. And just as a new government watchdog report alleging that U.S. aid failed to properly vet Palestinian beneficiaries of American tax dollars. Hannah Rifkin with the story.
The General Accounting Office, or GOA, now recommending strict new measures be put in place for future donations, explaining that from 2015 to 2019, the U.S. Agency for International Development, or USAID, repeatedly failed in its vetting program. Specifically, the report saying that while USAID fully complied with vetting for primary recipients, it did not thoroughly investigate secondary recipients, many of whom are linked to Palestinian terrorism. Now, President Trump, in compliance with U.S. law, cut most funding to the PA over its continued salary payments to terrorists. So this largely reduced the USAID problem. But in reversing Trump-era doctrine, President Biden now quietly increasing funds to the PA to the tune of nearly $100 million. Biden very publicly already launched a $15 million assistance program for COVID relief to the PA. But in a move that received nearly no media attention, the Biden White House also notifying Congress of intentions to spend at least $75 million on the PA to, quote, regain trust and goodwill with Palestinian society. It's unclear, though, if the $15 million in COVID relief is a part of the larger $75 million or in addition to it. What is clear is that this is evidence of a very clear shift in American policy towards the Israel and Palestinian conflict, especially as the U.S. State Department, meanwhile, announcing the lifting of sanctions against ICC investigators. Imposed by President Trump, the economic and visa sanctions targeted ICC Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda and an aide over alleged war crime investigations in Afghanistan, Israel, and the Palestinian territories. Investigations that Israel, at least, condemns as biased.
So what's going on between Jerusalem and Washington? Are we back to putting daylight between us? And if so, to what end? Joining me to discuss is research fellow at the Institute on Counterterrorism and the IDC Herzliya, Dr. Fadi Ismail, and columnist for Newsweek and editor of HistoryCentral.com, Mark Schulman. Thank you both so much for being with us. Now, do you think that the United States is right to resume payments to the Palestinian Authority to the extent that they are, payments that were cut during the Trump administration? Fadi, I'll start with you.
I wish it was a yes/no question. I hope that there are things happening behind the scenes, some understandings, some dynamic that we do not see in an overt manner right now. I would assume that there is something going on, perhaps something that has to do with the upcoming Palestinian elections, maybe something that has to do with the identity of the support to the replacement for President Abbas. I think there are a lot of information is missing, a lot of data is missing before we can say categorically it is a good move or a bad move. The main question is, do we want the Palestinian Authority to exist? That's the main question. And if the answer is yes, then there is no way away from supporting it financially and in other ways. If we think that we can give up on the Palestinian Authority, then that opens up the question that you have just brought up. So that really relies on or depends on President Biden's administration vision for the entire region. And we're still trying to figure out the signs to divine from the little clues we hear from various administration officials. How are they going to look at the Middle East as a whole so that we can understand or derive from it what would be the place of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the Middle Eastern dossier as a whole. And there are many signs in Washington that seem to show us that the entire Middle East is being deprioritized even further than what it was during the days of President Trump. But again, we still haven't heard from anybody in the administration any clear set of principles upon which they will base their policies. Just, hints and suggestions.
So Mark, I want to turn to you if maybe you can respond to what Dr. Ismail just said and maybe include some of the context with respect to certain congressional acts like the Taylor Force Act, which actually barred the United States from handing over certain payments over the salaries paid to terrorists by the PA.
Look, at least as of the moment, both I think the United States and Israel want the Palestinian Authority to remain. So I think that giving them money was an obvious statement. I don't even think the money is being given directly to them. It's being given to hospitals and other USAID projects. Money is fungible, obviously. So the fact of the matter is, the United States cutting off all aid to the Palestinians was sort of, cutting off your nose to spite your face. Israel wants, anyone in Israel wants the Palestinians, generally speaking, to do better economically, to do better in terms of health and everything else. So the fact that they're getting aid is a good thing. The whole Taylor Force was a very nice political maneuver. It made everyone feel good, but it really, again, since money's fungible, really doesn't make any real difference, and it never really made a difference. It was political theater in the United States, and it was political theater here.
So if you think that it's
we've gone back and forth.
If this funding, assuming that, I'll take both of you at your word, assuming this funding is necessary, right, to keep the PA going, why do you think that it was pushed so quietly? We had $15 million that was pushed as COVID relief very publicly, lots of fanfare, and then $75 million, not clear whether that includes the 15, that was just passed kind of under the radar to Congress. Why do you think that is? That it was
because very, very simply, it's not a high priority. Biden wants to talk about infrastructure. He wants to talk about the pandemic. He doesn't want to be talking about the Palestinians. And Blinken is busy trying to create coalitions against China, redo America's coalitions in Europe. And this is just not a priority for anybody. So $75 million is, such small change these days when Washington is spending trillions of dollars, that it really wasn't a high priority item for anybody. And I don't think it was a conspiracy. I just think it was okay. We're going to give them some more money. It wasn't a big deal, and they weren't interested in making it a big deal because what was to be gained by making it a big deal? They didn't notify Congress. It's public. Just no big deal was made about it, and I don't see why they would make a big deal about it. Whose advantage is it?
All right. So, Fadi, do you think that this effort will work? Will the Palestinian Authority actually respond positively to this and come back to the negotiating table, or is this just another reason to stall and say, hey, thanks for the payments, I'll wait for the next one?
again, it is not a black and white situation. Negotiations happen all the time behind the scenes. They exchange messages all the time. $75 million to help control COVID-19, which is in everybody's best interest, globally speaking.
Well, it was the 15 for COVID, and then the 75. It's the details of how that's going to be spent has not really been said.
In the end, this is not what's going. I agree with Mr. Schulman. This is not what's going to change the dynamics or anything. It could be a very nice opening salvo on the side of the Biden administration, perhaps show some level of goodwill. Yeah, that could be something like that. We still need to know more about what do they plan to do. I mean, vis-a-vis the Middle East as a whole and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in specific. You have to understand the Trump administration's legacy in the Middle East is enormous. We had some diplomatic breakthroughs here that were almost impossible to believe. And that happened because of another big issue, which is the Iran issue and the enormous pressure that was put in Iran. Now, this is a new administration that looks at things in a very different way, which is fine. It's all right. But they have to explain, okay, so what is the overriding determinant of U.S. policies in the Middle East? But quite frankly, there are much bigger fish to fry today in the Beltway.
We're not in the center of the world for the moment. You know, we've been in the center of the world for so long. We like being in the center of the world. Right now, we're not in the center of the world. Everyone's looking elsewhere. So we have to get used to that.
All right. On that note, I'm gonna end it. Thank you both so much, though, for your insights, Dr. Fadi Ismail, Mark Schulman. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
All right, moving along, in an upsetting new poll, reportedly over half of Jewish Americans have either experienced or directly witnessed some form of anti-Semitic incident in the last 5 years. And this news following major events with Nazi ties in the past few years as well. Events including the 2017 Charlottesville rally and the recent breach of the United States Capitol on January 6th. But here to discuss this apparent rise in anti-Semitism is Chen Mazik, Senior Fellow at the Tel Aviv Institute. Chen, thanks so much for being with us. Now, a common question to start. Has this hate always been here waiting to bubble up to the surface, or is it actually spreading?
It's absolutely spreading. I mean, if you're looking at numbers from any organization that is monitoring anti-Semitism and hate crimes against Jews, we keep on seeing a trend that is not a positive trend, that is going upwards. And this report by the ADL is joining other reports, as I said, and we are monitoring it in the Tel Aviv Institute, and we're seeing this rise in hate speech. Indeed, violent or physical attacks on Jews have decreased, but what we associate it with is because of COVID and because of the social distancing and lockdowns, that those physical attacks have decreased. But we do see an increase in the attacks online, specifically in social media. And I think the ADL also mentioned that 36% of the people that they surveyed reported that they have experienced anti-Semitic attacks online. And for me, as someone that is also very active online, and for us at the Tel Aviv Institute, we're seeing this increase on day to day. And we're very worried about what will happen next when people will be vaccinated and things will get back to normal, hopefully soon, in the United States and around the world. What should we expect is very concerning.
Well, okay, so to follow up, what do you think is driving this sharp rise, especially given the fact that, as you said, people have been at home because of COVID?
Yes, and people have been at home, and as they haven't had much opportunities to do anything else, we've seen rise with the QAnon conspiracy theory that is very much heavily surrounding Jewish people and alleged control of Jews over the world, and white supremacists, like you mentioned, the Base is one of those groups that is operating online, a white supremacist neo-Nazi group that is planning attacks on Jews and blaming Jews for this race war, as they call it. So we think that people have more time on their hands and they're more engaging online with this type of hate speech and anti-Semitism that really poison a lot of people's mind and make them believe those conspiracies when there's not much, human interaction is decreasing, and that really leads to that. There's a psychological effect to it as well.
All right, Chen, thank you so much for shedding some light on this. Happy holidays. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
All right, now back to Holy Week in Israel with Passover ending and Easter Sunday approaching. And just in time for the holidays, Israel's Antiquities Authority unveiling a new potential explanation for an ancient Christian mystery. Welcome to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Controlled by the Armenian Orthodox Church, this is among the most sacred places in all of Christianity, believed to be the final resting place of Jesus Christ. But aside from Jesus, the church housing another marvel that has had researchers scratching their heads for years. Thousands upon thousands of crosses carved into the walls of one of the chapels in the church, the Chapel of St. Helena.
This unique phenomenon always baffles us. Is it graffiti of the pilgrims or rather something else? Now we got an opportunity, a rare opportunity to answer on this question when the Armenians renovate their holy part in the church, the Chapel of St. Helena.
The chapel, opening to renovations in 2018, invited the Antiquities Authority and Hadassah Academic College of Jerusalem to analyze the mysterious carvings. And after finding these unique crosses on the walls, archaeological researchers immediately began deciphering them using advanced optical techniques.
If one could spend all the time in the world looking at these objects in situ, it would be very nice, but one can't, especially in a place where there are limitations on visiting and limitations of access. Therefore, by creating this kind of image, you can then later on, back in the studio or in your office, you can basically relight the object any way you wish and at any level of detail, and apply these various filters in order to try and pull out as much as possible information about the object itself.
And the result? Well, after painstaking investigation, graffiti was definitely ruled out.
What we saw with the optical machinery, that we map all the crosses inside them, and we saw that all of them have the same depths and even the marking of the mason. So if you look at these thousands of crosses, I can say, very careful, because we are only in the beginning of the research, that maybe 2 or 3 hand artists made these crosses. It's not a pilgrim, only 3 hands of the artists. So it's not a graffiti. It's something more organized of the church.
So if not graffiti, then what was it? IAA officials finally think they have the answer.
Let's say that you are an Armenian pilgrim who visits the Chapel of Helena, the Holy Sepulchre. So you pay something to the priest, you pay something to this special artist, and he carved for you, for the benefit of your soul and your relative souls, he carved for you a special cross in the most sacred place for Christianity on earth. And that's it. This is, for our point of view, the explanation of this unique phenomenon.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
Wow, Aaron, some exciting weather coming our way this weekend. Windstorms expected in the north and thunderstorms in the south tonight, with lows in the 40s and 50s or 8 to 13 degrees Celsius. Then Friday, partly cloudy weather with some rain in the north, calling for temperature averages in the 60s or the mid-teens in Celsius. Into Saturday now, the rain is expected to continue, with highs in the 60s and 70s or upper teens in Celsius. Back to the studio now, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Chana. And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Wow, it took me a second to see that. Oh, poor guy, I had to get in there. This is a new reason to not like matzah, I guess? I don't know, I do like matzah, though. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.34 shekels to the American dollar and 2.65 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then don't forget to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv. Subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates while you're there. And of course, check out our new breaking news channel on Telegram. I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you so much for watching.